First graphic we want to put up is the percentage of group/graded stakes winners for stallions these days versus some of the great stallions of the past. And you can see at the top of the list right now, Justify, 5% of his foals become group graded stakes winners. Northern Dancer, for contrast, 12%. Nijinsky, 12%. Gunrunner second at 4.9%. I'm curious what that data means to you, Tink, because to me, it would suggest that there's too many stallions, because there sure as hell aren't not enough graded stakes races.
Right.
We've beat that
Yeah.
drum plenty on
Yeah.
this show. There are too many graded stakes and stakes races. So you would think that, relatively speaking, there's too many stallions looking at that data, but you tell me what you think it means.
Yeah, I think that there are different ways to think about it. First of all, obviously, I have the benefit of being old enough to have been around when the list on the right in both of these graphics that you're going to see, the list on the right headed by Northern Dancer and Nijinsky, they are from stallion lists of 1986, so approximately 40 years ago. If you look at that list, certainly the first 8 or 9 or 10 of the stallions on the right side, that was like nothing that we've seen in the last 30 years, 25, 30 years. I mean, that was a tremendous, part of the advantage was Northern Dancer was such a brilliant influence that you had, sons like Nijinsky and Danzig to carry, and Leafard. A lot of this is about Northern Dancer, what you're seeing there. But even some of the other, Seattle Slew, Blushing Groom, outstanding sire. Obviously, Mr. Prospector, Aladar, Vaguely Noble. His Majesty was a terrific sire. In reality, I have a real soft spot for, until you get down to the last 3 or 4, which were just, they were useful sires, I would say. It's so much stronger, with all due respect, than what you see today, that the numbers in that context are not a surprise to me. Now, I think that to be fair to the contemporary sires who look like very weak tea relative to those sires from whose offspring were running in 1986. I think you have to take into account, and I think that this may be, it's not just one of it, may be the primary factor. They're bred to too many mares. Northern Dancer, especially, Northern Dancer was never bred to 40 mares, I don't think, in a single season. And, Justify's bred to 220 or 30 or whatever the number is. What that means by definition is that you're diluting the quality of the mares. Yeah, sure, they're all good mares, good pedigrees, and or good race records. But the ones who are able to get to Northern Dancer, Nijinsky, Danzig, Seattle Slew, Leafard, Blushing Groom, and Mr. Prospector had to be top mares. There wasn't room for the unraced mare with the nice pedigree. I mean, I'm not saying it never happened that there was an unraced mare, but I'm saying the best of the best mares were, they wanted to get into those books. And I think that it is very likely to be a big reason. Now, I'm not in any way suggesting that if Justify and Gunrunner and Curlin and Into Mischief had books of 40 or 50, that their numbers would necessarily be as good as Northern Dancer, Nijinsky, and Danzig. They probably would not. But would they be notably higher? Yes, I think they would be. So I think that that's probably a big part of that. But Joe, you stole a little bit of my thunder, which is that because of the explosion of graded stakes in the U.S., far too many than are deserved, that should have been a mitigating factor in this kind of table, right? There are many more opportunities, even if the mares weren't as good. You have so many more offspring of look. You can have a sire that hasn't had a runner yet, and they're going to have more foals on the ground than some of the sires on the right had in their whole careers. So with all of those horses running, with all of the available graded stakes winners, despite what I said about the mares being a factor, they don't match up with the ones from 40 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And the point about them breeding to too many mares, I think, is another obvious takeaway from looking at that data. I want to move on to another pet peeve of yours, and I think rightfully so, is the durability list. We'll put up another graphic from Tink. It's the top 10 and bottom 10 sires on the Grayson Jockey Club durability list. So we're going to compare 2008 to 2022. In 2008, the top 10 of the most durable sires had their starters average career starts between about 22 and 26. Their average career starts, those stallions, was a little bit over 32. The bottom 10, 15, 14, 15 starts. The stallions average career starts was about 13. That's dropped even lower in 2022. The top 10 most durable sires, on average, their horses run between 19 and 22 times about, and their average career starts was about 20. So it's pretty much in line right now. The bottom 10 between 12 and change and 13 and change starts, and the stallions average career starts for that bottom 10 is about 14. So we got to be careful and say that correlation is not causation. Just because these things line up does not mean that necessarily the lack of racing and longevity of stallions means that their foals are going to be more brittle, less durable. But this data is pretty revealing, I think. And I always think about this and I wonder if it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we talked about this a little bit before with the bounce theory. Like, yeah, it's if you train horses such that you don't run them within 4 or 5 weeks after a big top, and then suddenly you do decide to do that, and then they regress, are they really regressing based on the race that they ran, or are they regressing based on the way that you're training them? And I just always wonder when we get these statistics, like, are these numbers because the horses are less durable, or are they because just in general, people have decided to race their horses less? Curious what you think about that, Tony.
Yes, Joe, I tend to agree with you that there are always a number of variables. These situations that even when I come up with statistics that are eye-opening, like these arguably are, they're multifactorial. It's not as simple as saying, okay, you've got a sire has to start X number of times in order to produce durable horses. No doubt there are other factors, and one of the factors that I try to impress on people is the mares, are playing a huge role. And even if you have stallions that have only started a handful of times, you can mitigate their transmission of less than ideal durability by breeding, more sturdy and sound mares to them. So there are ways to mitigate. But I do think that these top and bottom 10 sire stats that I came up with are illustrative of a correlation that is meaningful. I don't think I need to go further than that. John, what do you think?
Tony, it still goes back to, the argument of these horses aren't running enough. They're being retired and placed into the breeding pool. And, is it the number of starts that we should be concerned about? Is it the date in between the number of days in between races that we should be concerned about? I don't know if there's one over the other. I think that it's like you said before, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that both issues are being impacted and reintroduced to the gene pool so many times that if you don't have this as a stat, but you look at the top stallions as far as number of mares that are being bred, and for the most part, it's newer stallions, it's unproven stallions, which means that those genes that are being promulgated within our industry, especially in the first couple of years, we don't know if that's good or bad. Golden Powell only ran half a dozen times or so. I don't know if that means that he's going to be a good stallion or not, but what it means is that he himself wasn't able to produce over a couple of years' time of being able to run consistently, and now he's being bred and will have, in essence, 240 or 250 foals out there in the first year, that we don't know if they're going to fulfill his prophecy or Uncle Mo's prophecy or the female sides. It's concerning, as a breeder and as a race owner, it's concerning to me. Now, does that mean that we didn't breed mares to Golden Pal? No, we did. We bred 2 mares to Golden Pal in his first year and bred 1 to him last year. So, in essence, we are adding to the problem in that example. But I don't know if there's an answer. I certainly don't think that the number of mares capped is the right answer. Because I'm a big guy. I'm a big believer in the marketplace, and the marketplace will dictate whether or not a horse is going to be bred and overbred, within the industry. I just feel like that there's got to be something done to tip the scale to some of these more proven horses that have shown that they can produce sounder, better horses. That would help the overall gene pool. I just don't want it done artificially necessarily.
I think maybe the only possible incentive I could think of is to have like certain races, put up some big money races to stallion for horses by progeny of stallions that only started a certain amount of times, or mares a certain amount of times. Like they're never going to be able to restrict the stallion market. There's too much powerful, concentrated interest in Kentucky to ever be able to step in and tell people, hey, you can't breed your stallion to more than so many mares. I think there may have to be like a separate string of races where, kind of like the claiming crown, where we appreciate and we reward the horses who are filling the races throughout the year, the horses who do run a lot, the horses who do fill those cards, and it's like a separate set of races. I don't know. That's my only idea for how we could possibly begin to combat this, because the statistics speak for themselves.